Amy Goodman, in your first book, The Exception to the Rulers, you write, and you're quoting the Washington Post here, that Amy Goodman is the journalist as uninvited guest. Why do you write that?
Well, we're not supposed to be a party to any party. We are journalists. There's a reason why our profession, journalism, is the only one explicitly protected by the U.S. Constitution. We're supposed to be the check and balance on power.
In that book also, War and Peace, Life and Death. That is the role of the media in a democratic society, to provide a forum for this discourse. To do anything less is a disservice to the servicemen and servicewomen of this country.
That's right. You know, I've just flown in from Denver, where I was at the National Conference on Media Reform. And when we flew into the airport, at Denver Airport, that's where people hold up signs when you come out to pick you up. And as we were walking, there were some soldiers there. They were going to be picking up a general. And as we walked by, they were waving. And I thought maybe the general was behind me because they had a sign for the general. And didn't look that way, went to baggage. I thought, I want to go back and talk to them. So we went back and I said, do you watch Democracy Now? And they said, every day. And so I said, really? Why do you watch? And they said, it's objective and you cover war. It is not about whether you're for or against war. It's about covering the most serious decision a country can make. I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day. As you quoted there, war and peace, life and death, and anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women of this country. They can't have these debates on military bases. They rely on us in civilian society to have the discussions that lead to the decisions about whether they live or die, about whether they are sent to kill or be killed. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society.
One of the recurring themes in your writing is the corporate media, as you call it. What is the corporate media, and what does it do or not do?
Well, that's what most people see on television, on most channels, not all, and that's the hope. It's the channels, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, that break for the advertisers, that turn to corporate support. I see the hope as public media, media that's brought to you by the listeners and the viewers who are deeply committed to independent information. When we cover war, not brought to you by the weapons manufacturers. When we cover climate change, not brought to you by the oil, the gas, the coal companies, the nuclear companies. When we cover the healthcare debate in this country, not brought to you by big pharma, the drug companies, or by the insurance industry, but brought to listeners and viewers by listeners and viewers who feel that information is power, that information is essential. It's the oxygen of a democracy.
Back to the exception to the rulers. Our motto at Democracy Now! Is to break the sound barrier. We call ourselves the exception to the rulers. We believe all media should be. What do you mean by sound barrier?
Well, so often on the networks, we get this small circle of pundits who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. We go to the communities to talk to people in this country and around the world who are at the heart of the story. It's not always easy to find, but people sense authentic voices. I think it's why so many young people listen to Democracy Now! We have such a diverse audience in this country and around the world, because it's that sense of people knowing what they're talking about because they're talking from their own experience. I think that's the best kind of journalism. Providing a forum for people to speak for themselves, providing a forum for people from different strata of society to debate and discuss with each other the critical issues, but hearing those voices of a great diversity of people, that is the role of journalism in a democratic society.
When did Democracy Now! Start, and how's it funded?
Well, we started 17 years ago as the only daily election show in public broadcasting. It began on radio. It was February of 1996. That was the second election of President Clinton, ultimately, though we didn't know that at the time. And I was actually in Haiti when I got the call from Pacifica Radio, where the show was first established. And you know, when they said, "Do you want to host democracy? Do you want to host this daily election show?" I thought it was a very interesting challenge because, you know, I've covered places where people get gunned down when they go to the polls, and places like East Timor on the other side of the earth, and places like Haiti. And yet the overwhelming majority of people vote. Why, I wondered, in this country don't people vote? Or I should say, the majority do not vote. And I don't think it's apathy. And I didn't think it was then. But I was interested to follow the primaries as a kind of map of the country and go to these states and see what people are doing in their communities. How are they civically engaged? So we did the show, and the election happened, and we thought that would be it. But there was more demand for the show after the election than before. And so we were broadcasting on a few dozen community radio stations. And it kept growing, and then the week of September 11th happened. That week, coincidentally, I'm talking about September 11th, 2001, we were slated to go on one TV station. It was in New York. It was a public access TV station, and we were broadcasting from an old firehouse that had been turned into a community media center.
Down by the Twin Towers.
It was, yes, the closest national broadcast to the World Trade Center. So on September 11th, we were going to be broadcasting on television as well for Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Now we broadcast 8 Eastern Standard Time every morning. Then it was 9. So the first plane hit the first tower of the World Trade Center at 8:47. We didn't know it was happening. We were in the garret of this old firehouse. The second plane hit at 9:03. We still didn't know it was happening. We were, though, doing a show that day on the connection between terror and September 11th, 1973, in Chile, when Salvador Allende, the democratically elected president, died in the palace as the Pinochet forces rose to power. Unfortunately, the U.S.-backed Pinochet forces, the Kissinger-backed Pinochet forces, the Nixon-backed Pinochet forces, ITT-backed Pinochet forces. And Pinochet was a dictator who was ruthless, who ran that country for 17 years. Thousands of Chileans were killed. September 11th, 2001 is not the first time, or September 11th, that September 11th is connected with terror. It's happened around the world. I mean, September 11th, 1977 in South Africa. Steve Biko, the founder of the Black Consciousness Movement, was being beaten to death in the back of a van by apartheid forces. Unfortunately, U.S.-backed apartheid forces died in the early morning hours of September 12th, 1977. In Guatemala, September 11th, 1990, the Guatemalan anthropologist Myrna Mack was killed by Guatemalan security forces, sadly, U.S.-backed Guatemalan security forces. September 11th, 1971, here in the United States, in my state, in New York, that was the Attica Uprising, September 9th to 13th. 2 days later, Governor Rockefeller would call out the state troopers, and they would open fire on the prisoners, killing something like 79 prisoners and guards. Killing 39 prisoners and guards, critically wounding 88 others, and injuring hundreds of others. September 11th is not the first time that terror has come to U.S. soil. Ask any African American about slavery, any Native American about what's happened in this country. But September 11th, 2001 was a horrific moment. 3,000 people incinerated in an instant. We'll never actually know how many people died, because those who go unnamed, undocumented in life often go undocumented in death, and they were the undocumented workers around the World Trade Center. But it was horrific. And I think it united us with people around the world who have been victims of terror.
So Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, has been on the air since, on television, since 2001.
Since that day. And then once we went on Manhattan Neighborhood Network as emergency broadcasting, stations around the country, public access stations, started calling and saying, we want to run the broadcast. And, you know, we were dealing with breaking news, so I didn't think